Okay, so when you think of the manga series JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
For a lot of people, it's probably the poses, right? These totally over-the-top, impossibly dramatic character poses that you see them and you know exactly what they're from. They become a whole cultural phenomenon.
And then, of course, there are the battles. Just these absolutely wild, unpredictable fights where you feel like the rules are being made up on the spot. And all of that is wrapped up in this art style that's just completely unforgettable. It's always changing, and it's kept people hooked for, what, over 4 decades now? It all looks and feels completely spontaneous. I mean, the word bizarre is right there in the title. But here's the big question we're going to dig into today. Is all this madness just random genius? Or is there a meticulous, even logical system hiding underneath it all? All right, so to figure that out, let's start with the battles themselves, because this is really where you see how Araki just completely changed the game for combat in manga. You know, back in the early days of shonen manga, fights were pretty simple. It was usually just whoever was physically stronger, well, that's who was going to win. Araki looked at that and was like, nope, we're not doing that. His huge innovation was to build his fights around something called shikumi, which basically means a mechanism or a system. So instead of just raw power, it's about rules. Even way back in the early parts of JoJo with the whole Haemon breathing thing, he was already turning fights into these logic puzzles. It wasn't about who could punch the hardest. It was about who could outsmart the other guy using the system he'd created. And that idea, well, it hit its absolute peak with the introduction of stands. Now, a stand is, this visual manifestation of a person's life energy. But here's the crucial part. Every single one has a really unique, super specific power that has to follow a strict set of rules. No exceptions. And you can see that evolution so clearly right here. He starts with Hamen, which is the single technique. Anyone can potentially learn it to fight vampires, right? But then he moves to stands, and that's not a single technique anymore. It's a framework. It's a system that lets him create basically infinite, unique powers, all with their own rules. And that's the big shift. Battles stopped being about brawn and started being about brains. It became a game of wits, not just who's got bigger muscle. Okay, so if the work is built on a system, what about the guy who built the system? Who is Hirohiko Araki really? Let's take a look at the man himself and the methods he uses. Now, you'd think the guy who creates something this wild would be, I don't know, some kind of chaotic, unpredictable artist. But it's the complete opposite. Araki is an incredibly disciplined craftsman. He keeps his work life and his home life totally separate. He works with one long-term editor to keep things consistent. He's super focused on his health and having a solid routine. And all that discipline, that's the foundation that lets him be so consistently creative for so long. And this isn't an accident. It's totally by design. He keeps his team small, his process tight, and that's how he stops his artistic vision from getting watered down. That's the secret sauce to keeping a unique voice for decades. So this methodical approach isn't just for his battles or his work schedule. It's for everything. It defines his entire creative journey. When he makes a change, believe me, it is not random. It is 100% calculated. Just look at the timeline of his career. It maps it all out. He debuts in 1980. Then in 87, boom, JoJo starts and he gives us the Hammond system. Then in the 90s, he makes this very deliberate shift in his art, moving towards something more sculptural and refined, completely different from what was popular. And by the time we get to Steel Ball Run in 2004, his themes have gotten way deeper too, digging into these complex ideas about society, faith, you name it. And wow, this comparison really says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you've got that classic 80s action hero vibe, super muscular, dense lines. But look at the right. The figures are sleek, they're elegant, they almost look like classical statues. And that's not a fluke. That's a direct result of him teaching himself, studying Renaissance art and fashion photography. And as his art got more sophisticated, so did his stories. The simple good versus evil stuff gave way to much deeper, more complex critiques of society. He started asking bigger, more mature questions. Okay, so let's bring it all together. What's the big takeaway here? What is Araki's real legacy? I mean, look at this number. Over 40 years. 40! You don't stay at the top of your game for that long running on random flashes of inspiration. That kind of longevity, that only comes from a solid, repeatable system. And yeah, of course, his influence is everywhere.
You can't swing a cat without hitting a manga or an anime that's borrowed something from JoJo. The poses, the powers, the music references. But that's just the surface.
Because here's the real point. Lots of people can copy the flair, the poses, the style. That's the easy part. But Araki's true genius? It's the system underneath it all. That logical, sustainable way of creating, that is so much harder to replicate. And that's his real lasting contribution.
So that leaves us with a pretty cool question to think about, right? The next time you come across a piece of art that just feels chaotic or, well, bizarre, take a second look. What hidden systems might be running the show? What incredible logic could be hiding just underneath all that beautiful madness?